Thanks, Barry. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming today. I appreciate this. I know you're all busy. I know there's a lot of other places that you could be on a Friday morning rather than in Burlington in a conference room with me. So I really appreciate you coming to this session. I will do my best to make this a good use of your time. My name is Ted McNulty. I do work for a company called AdDaptive Intelligence. We are a digital advertising platform. We're based right down in Waltham, not too far from here. Have you ever noticed that when you come to a conference like this, that the sessions tend to be divided into two very distinct categories? Some sessions have to do with digital or online direct marketing tactics, while others are focused more on traditional or offline direct marketing techniques. Very rarely do you find a session that has to do with both. And when you think about it, it makes sense because even though both of these types of direct marketing have the same goal of selling more product, they're very different in the tactics and the data and even the language that they use. If you've ever been in a session with a digital marketer, you might have heard terms like DSP, DMP, PMP, SSP. These are actual terms. Ad servers, ad exchanges, programmatic. Digital marketers love their buzzwords. They love their acronyms. So much so that it's sometimes hard to even understand what they're talking about, right? And if you've ever been to a session with a traditional direct marketer, you're going to hear other terms. You're going to hear things like postage rates and open rates and response rates, things like that. Things that you've heard for years, terms that have been around for decades. So in the past, you had two very different approaches to direct marketing, each with their own distinct language. So it made sense that you had to talk about these two things separately. But we are now beginning to enter a very interesting phase in our industry, where online and offline direct marketing tactics are beginning to merge. We are now starting to see a lot more overlap between the techniques that digital and traditional direct marketers are using, especially in the data that's being used to target campaigns. But the interesting thing is this is not happening in the way that you might think. You might assume that it's the traditional direct marketers that are starting to adopt some more of the digital techniques because that's where a lot of the innovation is happening on a digital side. But that's actually not what we're seeing. It's the opposite. We are now seeing that it's the digital direct marketers that are now beginning to finally fully understand and appreciate the accuracy of the data that traditional direct marketers have been using for years. And this has tremendous implications for everybody here today because now direct marketers can have the best of both worlds. They can enjoy the immediacy that's offered by digital and combine that with the accuracy of the data that traditional direct marketers have been using for years. And this is what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how our industry has come full circle. And to demonstrate this, I'd like to tell you a story. I'd like to tell you a story about my own journey in the direct marketing industry because I think my own career is a good metaphor for how this industry is evolving, how it started out using traditional tactics, kind of gravitated over to digital for a while. It is now beginning to move more back into some more of the traditional direct marketing tactics. So I'd like to tell you a story about my own career in the direct marketing industry. My career in direct marketing started a long time ago. I won't say exactly how long it's been, but let me give you a couple hints. I had a full head of hair back then, so I used to look like this guy. It's no longer the case. It was before the internet. There was no internet when I first started my career in direct marketing. And the company that I started with was Dun & Bradstreet. So I started my career, my direct marketing career at D&B. And my job at Dun & Bradstreet was to sell mailing lists and telemarketing lists to B2B direct marketers. That was my job. And the process that I use to create these lists is a process that everybody here is very familiar with. You've all done this a million times. Typically, when I would start creating a list for one of my clients, I would start by selecting by something called a NAICS code. Actually, full transparency, NAICS codes weren't even invented when I first started. We used to use something called an SIC code back in the day, right? I think most of you know what this is. These are just simply codes that the government has come up with to classify every business in the US under a specific industry. It's a very powerful way for B2B marketers to target campaigns by industry. So in most cases, when I was creating my list, I would start by creating or selecting a NAICS code so we can target this list by industry. Then I would typically overlay other firmographic data that we would have on these companies to further narrow down the targeting for these campaigns. I would add, for example, how many employees do these companies have? What was their annual sales? Typically to add that into the selections. Most of these campaigns are targeting specific decision makers, so I'd also do some title targeting. So I would layer that into the process as well. So you've all done this, right? This is a very familiar process with anybody that's been in the direct marketing industry. So this is what I would do. And then the mailing would go out. We'd send out the mailing. And again, this is very familiar, right? You've probably seen some version of this circle. If you've ever been to any presentation ever about direct marketing, you've seen some version of this circle, right? This is what would happen when the mailing went out. So we'd send the mailing out. We would get our responses. We would look at what was working, what wasn't working. We would use that information to optimize campaigns, feed those learnings back into the next mailing that went out. And so in theory, anyway, every time we went around a circle, the campaigns would improve. We'd get better performance each time we went through this process. And thinking back to those days, what I was thinking about the other day is I was thinking back to those days and the success I had there. This process worked really, really well. I was able to consistently deliver meaningful, measurable results for my clients when I was at Dun & Bradstreet, no matter what metric they were looking for. If they were looking for response rates, if it was conversions or sales, whatever they were looking for, we were able to consistently deliver very good results for my clients when I was at Dun & Bradstreet. And thinking back to why that was the case, it all came back to the data that we were using to target these campaigns, the accuracy of the data that we were using from Dun & Bradstreet. Dun & Bradstreet, as you probably know, uses publicly available sources of information to collect information on businesses, to build its database. Publicly available sources like business registration data, corporate directories, SEC filings, UCC filings. There are hundreds and hundreds of publicly available sources of data on businesses, and this is the information that D&B would use to build its database. And the reason why this information was so accurate is if you think about where this information came from, you could see why this information was accurate. When you think about it for a second, if I'm filling out a business registration form, I'm not guessing about the information that I'm putting on that form. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not inferring any data that I'm putting on that form. I'm putting down facts on that form, and it's those facts that D&B would use to build its database with accurate firmographic data on about 24 million businesses in the US. So that's why these campaigns work so well. It all started with the accuracy of the data that I was using to target these campaigns. So things are going very well for me at D&B. I got off to a great start in my career in direct marketing. Like I said, things were going well. Clients were really happy. They were renewing. They were upgrading contracts. Revenue was increasing. My commission checks were getting bigger. So things were great. I was there for a number of years, and I was very happy when I was at Dun & Bradstreet. But then, as I entered the late 1990s, my world changed. The internet burst onto the scene with promises of amazing new targeting capabilities. Through the use of technology, we would now be able to collect detailed information in real time on individuals and use that information to target people with a precision that was not possible in the offline world. The more I heard about this new technology and these new capabilities, the more excited I got. I was convinced that this was the direction that the direct marketing industry was heading. In my opinion, this was revolutionary. And I wanted to be part of this revolution. I drank the Kool-Aid when it came to digital. I was all in when it came to digital. So after a lot of soul searching and thought, I decided to make a decision and leave Dun & Bradstreet. I decided to join an internet company. Again, this is back in the late 1990s. This was during the first dot-com boom back in those days. And the company I decided to join wasn't too far from here. It was just south of here on 128. And when I joined this company, it was one of the largest internet companies in the world. At our peak, we had about 1,500 employees that worked out of our headquarters in Waltham. The company was called Lycos. Now, let me just stop here just for 1 second. I have a question for everybody in this room. Can I see a show of hands? How many people here have heard of Lycos before? Okay, wow, most people. Okay, great. The reason, it may sound like a silly question, but the reason I ask this is because where I work now at AdDaptive Intelligence, probably not a huge surprise, I am by far the oldest person at this company. I mean, not even close. I would say my age, I'm about double the average age of the people that work at this company, at least. And when I talk to people that work at AdDaptive and I get all excited about talking about my career, and I say, yeah, I used to work at this company called Lycos. We were one of the biggest companies in the internet. It was an exciting time. And they're looking at me like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, how old are you, man? No one's ever heard of it before. And it blows me away because we were the first search engine. We were the first search engine before Google even existed. Unfortunately, we made a few poor decisions when I was at Lycos, and now a lot of people have never heard of us before, and Google's worth $1 trillion. So it just shows you how volatile the online industry can be and how quickly things can change. But I'm glad most of you have heard of it before. That makes me feel a little bit better. And I'll admit, when I first made the move to digital, I was probably a little bit arrogant. I'll admit that. I was so convinced that digital was the future for direct marketing. I believed that it was only a matter of time before the companies in the traditional offline direct marketing world would soon become obsolete. I believed that was going to happen. It didn't make any sense to me. Why would somebody want to use that old data that I used to sell when I was at Dun & Bradstreet to target people when we had a much better option in digital? We didn't need to use that old compiled data from Dun & Bradstreet to target people. We had a better alternative in digital. We had something called a cookie. I'm going to guess most of you maybe have heard this term before. I think you probably know what a cookie is, but if you don't know what it is, a cookie is just a little piece of code that's dropped into your browser. So whether you're using Chrome or Firefox, whatever browser you're using, the cookie is dropped into your browser, and what the cookie does is it tracks what you do while you're online. It monitors all of your online behavior. It's going to look at the sites that you're visiting. It's going to look at the content that you're downloading, the articles you're reading, any white papers you download, any search terms you're doing. It's going to collect all of this information about you, all of your online behavior as you're surfing the web. And what it does with this information is it creates a digital profile of who you are. And the more information that's collected, the more time you spend online, the more detailed these profiles can get. So over time, your digital profile can get pretty detailed. Over time, your digital profile will include things like your gender, your age, your income level, your education level, your marital status. Are you married? Are you single? Do you have children? Do you own a house? What kind of car do you drive? Do you like to travel? Do you have a 401k plan? Over time, this information can get very detailed. So that's what a cookie does. And what this profile does, what we do with this digital profile is this is the profile that's used, and this information is what's used to target you with digital ads. So it's the information that's in this profile that will determine how you are being targeted with digital ads. And it will determine the ads that you will see while you're online. So that's how cookies work. So it just monitors your behavior, creates this profile, and that's used to target you while you're online. So when I first got into digital, I was like, wow, this is incredible. I was really fascinated by what this cookie could do. I said, surely this is a much better way of targeting people and collecting data than what I used to do when I was at Dun & Bradstreet. That's what I believed. And one of the most fascinating things to me now is about the cookie is that it's the only thing that has remained consistent throughout my entire career in digital. So when I made that move to Lycos 20 years ago, I stayed on the digital side of the business ever since. I have been in the digital industry for over 20 years. And over that time frame, I can't even begin to describe to you the amount of changes that I've seen in the digital industry, the number of companies that I've personally been involved with that have come and gone, the different pricing models and targeting options and attribution models in digital that have come and gone. It's mind-boggling the amount of change I've seen in the digital industry over the 20 years, but the one thing that has remained consistent throughout my entire digital career is the cookie. The day I started at Lycos, on my first day of Lycos, the majority of the campaigns that were running in digital at that time were targeted by using a cookie. Even today, just about every single digital campaign at the foundation of how it's being targeted is using a cookie. The cookie has been the most consistent thing in digital, the only thing I can think of that's still the same over my 20 years at digital. It just has become the standard for how digital campaigns are targeted. It just became accepted practice that this is how you do it online. No one ever questioned it until now. Now, the industry is beginning to question the validity of the information that's being collected by these cookies. The industry is beginning to question the accuracy of the data that's being captured by these cookies and the accuracy of the profiles that are being built on people. All of this now is becoming put under the microscope, and people are starting to look at this a little closer and say, does this really work like we thought it did? And what the industry is now beginning to realize is that cookies are not nearly as accurate as we thought they were. As it turns out, a lot of the information that's being collected by these cookies and a lot of the information that's being fed into these digital profiles is wrong. And because of that, a lot of people online are getting ads that really aren't targeted to who they really are. There's a lot of wasted ad impressions, a lot of wasted ad budget, and it's negatively impacting the performance of digital campaigns. So the industry is now beginning to realize that cookies are not what we thought they were. As a matter of fact, Deloitte did a study recently and showed that only 29% of the people that were surveyed by this Deloitte study believed that their online information was accurate at least 50% of the time. So even individuals now are beginning to realize that this cookie information and this information that's being collected by them online is not really accurate. And you may have noticed this yourself. Has anybody here ever got an ad on digital that was not targeted to who they really are or what they're interested in? Has that ever happened to anybody? Right? Happens all the time. The reason this is happening is because information that's being collected on you by these cookies to create this profile is wrong. So there's a lot of wrong information about you in this digital profile. That's why you get a lot of ads delivered to you that are not targeted. And there are now tools out there where you can actually see this for yourself. There are tools that you can go to where you can see your own digital profile and see for yourself how inaccurate this information can be. I would encourage you to go to the site after this conference. Write this down. There's a tool out there. It's called the Blue Sky Registry Tool. BLUEKAI.com, bluekai.com/registry. If you go to this tool, what will happen is this tool is going to show you the cookies that are on your browser. It'll show you the targeting segments that you've been placed in. And if you go to this tool, I think what you're going to find is that a lot of the information about you in these digital profiles and a lot of the information about you in these targeting segments is wrong. Let me show you an example. This is a screenshot of the tool. This is what the tool says about me. On the left side of the screen is an accurate description of who I am. So I do work for a company that does somewhere a little north of $20 million a year in sales. I am a white-collar worker. I am a full-time worker. And I'm in the advertising technology industry. That is an accurate description of me. On the right side is who these cookie companies think that I am. These are the targeting segments that I've been placed in. These cookie providers cannot accurately determine the size of the company that I work for. According to these cookie companies, I work for a company that ranges anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million a year in sales, all the way up to $500 million or more. According to these third-party cookie companies, I am a blue-collar worker. This one's my favorite. I don't know if you can see this one. According to these cookie providers, I'm already retired. Now, I am now getting to the point in my career where I'm actually starting to think about what I might want to do when I actually retire. And nothing against anybody here in the room, but presenting in front of a bunch of direct marketers on a Friday morning is not part of my retirement plan. So I am not yet retired. This is not happening yet. I hope this becomes true someday, but I'm not retired yet. And then if you look at the column on the far right, you'll see these are other targeting segments that have been placed in based on my professional interests. So according to these cookie providers, I'm interested in things like religious workers. I don't even know what that is. Wholesale, real estate. It's all over the place. The point I'm trying to make here is that the majority of the information about me in these targeting segments is wrong. And because this information is wrong, I end up getting a lot of ads served to me that I should not be getting because they're not targeted to who I really am. So any digital marketer that's only using cookies to target their campaigns is going to be wasting a lot of impressions, a lot of ad budget, and it's going to negatively impact the performance of their campaigns. And if you start to think about how these cookies are actually working, it starts to make sense why there is so much inaccurate information about me in these targeting segments. Essentially what these third-party cookie companies are doing is they're trying to guess and they're trying to infer a lot of information about me just based off of the websites I'm visiting. So basically what we have here is a computer that's trying to guess things like, what size company do I work for? Am I a blue-collar worker? Am I retired? Am I interested in religious workers? We have a computer that's trying to guess all this information about me just based on the sites I'm visiting. As you can imagine, in a lot of cases, the computer's going to guess wrong. That's why I get misclassified in these segments, and that's why there's a lot of wasted ad budgets that are happening in digital, and that's why campaigns are not performing as well as they could because the data that's being used to target the campaigns in many cases is wrong. So now, the digital industry is beginning to look for alternatives. The digital industry is now beginning to come to this conclusion that these cookies are not nearly as accurate as we thought they were. So we are actively looking for better sources of data that we can use to target people while they're online, more accurate sources of data that we can use to target people while they're online. And one of the most fascinating things that I've seen in my own personal career in this industry is that the digital marketers are now coming to the conclusion that the best data to target individuals while they're online is the same exact data that I used when I started my direct marketing career at Dun & Bradstreet 30 years ago. It's that offline data, that compiled data from companies like Dun & Bradstreet from these offline sources. That information is far more accurate than cookies. And because that information is more accurate, digital campaigns can be targeted much more precisely. We can get better results from our digital campaigns. So when I said before that this industry has come full circle, this is what I meant. Digital marketers are now using the same data that traditional marketers have been using for 50 years. It's come full circle where now it's the same data that digital marketers are now using to target digital campaigns. It's that offline data from companies like Dun & Bradstreet and other companies that collect information from these offline sources. And the way this happens, just understand kind of how we're able to bridge this data, this offline data to the digital world. And this is what we do. Other companies do this as well. This is not meant to be a sales pitch for AdDaptive, but this is one thing that we do and other companies do this. We can take that offline accurate data that's collected from companies like Dun & Bradstreet and bridge it into the digital world by connecting that offline firmographic data from these offline sources to the IP address. That's the bridge. That's the connecting point that allows us to take that offline data and bring it into digital, the IP address. IP is just simply a connection point to the internet. So every single company in the US has its own unique IP. We've been able to accurately identify the IP address on about 24 million businesses in the US. Companies like Dun & Bradstreet have detailed, accurate firmographic data on about 24 million businesses in the US. We've been able to connect those together so that now digital marketers can use the same data that traditional marketers have been using for years. So let me just show you what this looks like in our platform, just to get a better sense of how we can actually use this offline data for digital campaigns. So this is our platform. So I'm going to go through our platform and just show you kind of how can we use this offline data to target digital campaigns with this offline data. And as I go through this process, it's going to look very familiar because it's the same exact process that I use when I started my career at Dun & Bradstreet. So the first thing we can do is we can target by makes codes, just like I did 30 years ago, using the same exact data. So in this example, if I wanted to target companies, say, in the agricultural industry, I can drill down into that category. As you can see, if you're familiar with these NAICS codes, you can get very specific. You can get very granular as you're using these NAICS codes. So I can get down to something as specific as soybean farmers, for example. I can select those. Or wheat farmers, or rice farmers. And as I do that, you can see in the United States there are 15,432 farmers in the US that grow either soybeans, wheat, or rice. And this is 100% accurate. We know this because we have that offline data from D&B and other companies like that. But we also have their IP address. So we can use that offline data to filter down the companies that we want to target and then deliver ads to them through their IP address so we can target them with digital ads. And I should mention just real quick that this process of taking this offline data and bringing it to the digital world for targeting, this is happening almost exclusively in the B2B world at this point. This is really not happening as much on the B2C side at the household level. It could. The technology is certainly there to do the same thing, take household level data, map it to the household IP. That's not really happening there, more because of privacy concerns. If you've spent any time looking at what's happening in digital, you know there's a lot of issues around privacy. But it's not, and those issues are more around the household level targeting. So this is technique of using this offline data to target digital campaigns is primarily being used in the B2B space at this point. But you can see how we could use this data from D&B and use it to filter down. We can now see how many companies there are, and we can also overlay some of the other data. For example, if you wanted to do it by, further nail this down by sales volume, we could do that again, just like I did when I was working at Dun & Bradstreet 30 years ago, so I could add this filter in if I wanted to, using this offline data. I could do number of employees. Are they publicly traded companies? You can see all the same data, business type, years in business, things like that. So all this information that we have from these partners that we're working with that have accurate data from these offline sources, we can now use to target digital campaigns in the same exact way that I did when I started working for Dun & Bradstreet. But now as we start bringing this data into digital, there's some more interesting things you can do with it. Because I said right now, direct marketers have the best of both worlds. Now we have accurate data that we're all familiar with, that we've been using for years. But when you get that into digital, you can do some interesting things. You can do a lot more, for example, when it comes around reporting. So I could do a report on these 15,000 companies just to get a better idea of what this list actually looks like. So now you can start seeing the advantage of bringing this into digital. These are some of the advantages that digital brings to the table. Real-time reporting, so you can see what this campaign is going to look like. So we can look at how these companies are, in this case, farms are laid out across a heat map. No surprise, most of them are in the Midwest. We can also see how they're distributed by state. How many soybean, rice, or wheat farmers are there by state? North Dakota being the biggest one. We can look at it by zip code. What are the actual top 10 companies, their farms themselves, the top farms by revenue or employees we can see in real time. This is who we're going to be targeting. And then we can go down here and see how they break out by size, like sales volume. They're very small for the most part in this case. They're small farms. Almost all of them have under $1 million a year in revenue. And there's a couple big ones, but most of them are very small. And also, most of them have only between 1 and 4 employees. You know, it's no surprise, right? These are small, probably family-held farms in the Midwest that grow either soybean, rice, or wheat. And we know this for a fact because of the data we're using. If you look at the years in business, they've been around for a long time. These farms have been around as long as I have, 50 years or more. So these have been around a long time. And you can actually go down, if you want to scroll to the bottom, you can see how many there are by each of the different farms that we selected for this example. So how many wheat farmers are there, and then how many soybean or rice farmers. So when you bring this information into digital, there's a lot more you can do with it. You can see in real time what this information looks like. And then once the campaign goes live, you can see reporting on the same metrics by how the campaign is actually performing in real time. So you can start seeing how many impressions were delivered by number of employees, by revenue, by industry, and how many clicks did we see by each of those metrics, impressions and clicks, even down to the company level. We can now see impressions and clicks down to the companies that we're actually targeting for this campaign because we brought this information into the digital world, mapped it to the IP, so we can get some really interesting reporting on how this campaign is performing, and we can optimize this in real time. So this is when you start to see the advantage that digital can bring to the process. Any quick questions at all? I kind of went through that kind of quickly, trying to stay on track here. Are there any questions at all? No. Oh, you're just reading. Okay. Shaking his head. I can never tell if that's a good sign or a bad sign.
Who at the company would get this? Does it go to the IP address? But who is that? Is it the entire company that's going to pop up on? Or?
Really good question. Actually, I should have showed you that before. Let me just go back in here real quick. So that's a really good question. So we can also overlay job title here just like we could before. So think about this offline data. Not only are we collecting information, or the D&B and other companies are collecting information about the firmographics, they're also collecting contact information, just like when they did when I was working at D&B 30 years ago. We had collected by job title as well. So we have, through our data partners, the names and email addresses and about 60 million decision makers in the US. So we can actually layer that into the targeting as well. So we can actually do this to a point where we can say we only want to target specific businesses, like just using that example, like soybean farmers, but we only want to target the owner, or maybe that's not a good example, they only have 4 employees, but for a bigger company, you can start targeting, I only want to target these businesses of this size, but I only want to target the IT manager, for example. So then in that case, only people within the IT department will see the ad. So we can still get down to that level of targeting because we still have access to all that same data that D&B has in the offline world. We can still use it in digital. It's a good question. Most of our campaigns, we actually do that because most of them do want to target a specific decision maker or functional level within a business.
What vehicle are you using, email or?
Oh, I should mention it. So this would be display advertising at this point. This is display. And I'll talk a little bit about how this can interact with some of the offline channels because it's really interesting what's happening now. I'll talk about this in a second, but when I say the industry has come full circle, we're now starting to see a lot of the digital companies, now that we can use the same data to target digital and offline, is coordinating digital campaigns to target people, same people with display ads at the same time they're getting the direct mail piece. And I have an example, I'll show you that in a minute. But this right now is a digital solution display, meaning banners, video, native ads, whatever you're looking to target. This is a digital solution, but it's using that offline data to do it. Does that answer your question?
It does.
About title? Okay, good. So the other thing, so some other things you can do once this data has been brought into the digital world. There's other tactics you can start to use that have been very effective, especially for B2B marketers. One of the biggest trends we're seeing right now in B2B is something called account-based marketing. Have you ever heard that term before, or it's referred to as ABM in a lot of cases? All this means is targeting a specific list of companies that you already know about. So this information comes from you. It could be it comes from your CRM file. So it could be your best customers, your best prospects, but it's a specific list of companies that's provided to us by a client. What we can do now that we have all that data available, that offline data, we can use that offline data to find and identify the companies from your list within a database. We also now have their IP address, so we can target digital ads through the IP on just the list of companies that you provide. It's a very effective technique that's being used in digital today. Similar to that is another technique. Where's my clicker? Similar to that is something called data onboarding. It's very similar, but this is where we can start bringing in direct mail into this process. What data onboarding is it's kind of like account-based marketing. So it starts with a list of companies, typically that you want to mail to. We'll take that list of companies, we'll match that against our database because we have all of that data we can use to find those companies on your list within a D&B database. We have their IP, and we will identify who those companies are, and we will target those people with digital ads at the same time that they're receiving your direct mail piece. This is, when I say come full circle, this is the ultimate example of that because I was at a conference in Phoenix 2 weeks ago. It was a digital marketing conference, and a lot of the sessions that I sat through had to do with this. A lot of the sessions had to do with how do we incorporate direct mail into our digital efforts, because it really shouldn't be a decision between should we do direct mail or digital. We really should be doing both. And now that we have a consistent data set that's being used for both direct mail and digital, we can easily target the same people across both channels at the same time and improve results across both channels. It was a big topic of discussion at the conference. So that's the latest trend. Target the same people with direct mail that you're targeting with digital at the same time. And the way that's done now is because we have the same data that we're using to do this. And we have an example I could talk with you about, a case study where we actually did this for a client. The client was called the Rhode Island Novelty Company. I don't know if you've ever heard of this company before. No, neither have I. Neither had I until I started working with them. It's a really interesting company, fascinating company. So they reached out to us and they wanted to do a test with us. So I went down and met with them. And I noticed a couple interesting things about this company. First of all, they're not even in Rhode Island. They're close. They're right on the border. I think this is Fall River, but technically they're not even in Rhode Island. But this company is a leading supplier of novelty items. And when I drove up to this facility, I'll never forget. So I parked my car, and I saw this massive warehouse. I mean, this building went down as far as you can see, this massive 500,000 square foot warehouse. Massive building that was filled with 20,000 of the most useless items you've ever seen. I looked at this company, I'm like, why would anybody ever buy any of this junk. I could not imagine why anybody would buy this stuff. Just to give you an example of one of the 20,000 different types of products they sold, this is just one example, just to give you an idea of the kind of products that we're talking about. So this is referred to on their site as an inflatable alien hammer. All right? A lot of things I don't understand, but first of all, why would I need an inflatable hammer? Why would I put aliens on it? I just didn't make any sense to me. Like, who buys this stuff? Like, why are, I don't get it. This stuff is useless. But make no mistake, this was a very sophisticated company. They had grown a thriving business, primarily using traditional direct marketing techniques. They relied very heavily on sending out a catalog. They would send out this catalog millions and millions of times a year, usually themed around different holidays. So they had a Christmas catalog, and I'm sure right now they're sending out their St. Patrick's Day catalog, and they'll have a Halloween catalog and a 4th of July. And whatever the theme was, they'd have whatever junk related to that theme, that holiday, would be highlighted in this catalog. So they use this catalog very effectively, millions of times a year. And as you imagine, they've been in business for a while, so they also had this big email database, so they could do a lot of emails. But they were very sophisticated when it came to their analytics. They knew exactly what they were doing. And through their analysis, they came across a couple of trends. First of all, it's probably not a huge surprise, a lot of their buyers are starting to use online channels to buy and research products, right? Not a huge surprise. And also, they identified a couple of key vertical markets that they did very well in. So they came to us and said, what we want to do is we want to time a digital campaign so that we can serve online ads to the same exact people that we're going to be sending this catalog to, and time it so they're getting the digital ads at the same time they're getting the catalog. The idea would be they wanted to make sure their message was in front of their buyers wherever their buyers happened to be at that point, whether they're on their cell phone, whether they're on their computer, or whether they're in their office reading their direct mail. Wherever they happened to be, they wanted to make sure their message was there across multiple channels. So they came to us to run a test campaign to test this idea. And they decided, based on the research, they said, we want to target this test campaign to dental offices. At first, I didn't understand this. At first, I'm like, well, one more thing I don't understand about this company. Like, why would they want to target dental offices? What's the connection there? But then I started thinking about my own personal experience. And I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I hated the dentist. I mean, I knew when I walked through that door, pain was on the way. I mean, I just couldn't, I was petrified. Even today, I'm not, full disclosure, even today I'm really scared of the dentist. But back then when I was a kid, it was really a traumatic experience for me every time I walked through the door. The only thing that would get me through that ordeal was that at the end of this appointment, I could go to the toy chest and I could choose a prize from the toy chest. There's a good chance that whatever I picked came from the Rhode Island Novelty Company. This is the kind of products they sold. So it made sense that this would be a vertical market that would actually do pretty well for them. So they wanted to run a test against dental offices between 5 and 20 employees that had been in business for 3 years. So those have been established for a little bit. So we did this. So we went ahead and we took their list they were going to mail to, matched it against our database, figured out which companies that were going to get that were on their list that were going to get mailed the catalog, and timed a digital campaign so we can target those same users across both channels at the same time. As you probably guessed, it worked. Otherwise, I would not be using it in this example. Not a huge surprise, but it did. It worked really well. I mean, a couple metrics they were looking at to determine success. One was the click-through rate on a digital campaign. It was 3 times the industry average. Wasn't a huge surprise because typically what we see is that if you're going to mail or you're going to send a digital ad to people that are already in your database, they already know about you probably to some extent. So we're going to typically see better performance if we're serving ads to people that are coming from your own database. But 3 times the industry average was actually even better than we thought it was going to be. It was a really good metric that they were happy with. And also the most important metric they were looking at was conversion rates, which we exceeded as well. We actually got a 5% conversion rate on this campaign. I think their goal was like 3.5% or 4%. So we exceeded across that metric as well. And the reason this worked as well as it did is because we were able to engage the same users across online and offline channels at the same time. And the reason we can do this now is because now we're using the same data. The same exact data that we were using back when I started Dun & Bradstreet is now what we're using to target these digital campaigns. So to summarize, it all starts with the data. The reason why the campaigns worked as well as they did when I first started my career at Dun & Bradstreet because the data was accurate. What we found is that the data that was used to target digital campaigns, and by the way, the cookies are still primarily being used to target digital campaigns. This is a very new trend that we're seeing. We're using this offline data. But it all starts with the accuracy of the data. Now that we're starting to use that accurate data that I used when I first started Dun & Bradstreet in digital, we're starting to see better results. The campaigns are more targeted, there's less wasted impressions, and we're seeing better results because the data is accurate. Digital marketers realize that the best data to target online campaigns actually comes from offline sources. It's not the cookies. And as it turns out, traditional direct marketers knew this all along. They knew this already. It just took digital marketers about 20 years to figure it out. But this is a trend that we're going to continue to see because it works. So that's all I had. So I want to thank you for your time and your attention for this presentation. If there's any other questions, I don't know, do we have, I don't know how we're doing on time.
A few minutes.
A few minutes, okay. Are there any questions? Yeah.
I'm just trying to, this works with an in-house list as well, so.
Any list. All we need to do the match, all we need is the name and address of the business. If you have a DUNS number, even better, but I mean, we need the company address, because we have all that data now on our side. We have the name and address for every single business in the US, and we also have the IP address for every business in the US. So we can use our data to, send us your name and company name and address, we'll figure out who they are in our database. We'll say, okay, here's the IP for that business, and then we can serve them digital ads.
And those IP addresses don't change? I know on the consumer side, they often.
Good question. That's a really good question. That's a really good question. What we found is, you're right, on the consumer side, they do change quite a bit. But on the business side, what we have found is that they are far more static than you might think. They change very infrequently. They do change occasionally, but not nearly as often as they do on the consumer side. And by the way, without getting too much into the technology about how we do all this, even if it changed, we would be able to identify the new IP within a matter of a day or two, probably. So we'd pick up that new IP very quickly and be able to know it's a new IP address for that company. If anyone wants to get into really behind the scenes and in the weeds on this stuff and how we actually do all this, I'll stay afterwards. I'll be happy to talk. I didn't want to get into that in the presentation because it's really boring. but if anyone has any questions about how we're able to kind of take an offline like business registration form and use it to target digital ads across programmatic, it's a pretty wide gap. How do we connect all the dots? Happy to have a discussion after this with anybody who has any questions on that. Yeah.
Wouldn't Dun & Bradstreet have the name of the person you're trying to get to? And wouldn't it be better to go right to that person as opposed to, like, this is almost like a broad thing from what I've seen so far.
Well, as I said, we have all of the names of the people from D&B. And it's not just D&B, it's other sources. We do work with D&B on this, but we also have other sources. So we do have the names and email addresses on about, like I said before, 60 million decision makers in the US across all different job functions. So we know who they are. And we can also bring that contact information into digital as well. So when we're serving ads, it's in most cases, we're not just targeting a business. Sometimes we are. Sometimes clients don't care. But in a lot of cases, we're going to be targeting a specific person at that location. That's much more common. So we definitely have the capabilities of doing that. So we can target one person in one building with digital. So no one else in the building will see the ad except for that one person. We can definitely do that. It's a good point. Yeah. Oh, you go ahead.
Establish your pricing. Is it based on the number of addresses you start with, or the click-throughs?
Yeah. So our pricing, it's a good question. It's CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions in this case. So for every 1,000 impressions, an impression just anytime an ad shows up on a phone or on your computer, for every 1,000 impressions. It depends what kind of ads you're running, around $6 to $8 per 1,000 impressions. So it's a CPM model. So it really doesn't matter how many addresses that we're bringing on board and targeting. It's just how many ads do we want to show to them. Does that make sense?
I just wonder how that's all measured, because, what flashes on the screen versus what I actually notice or observe, like impressions.
Well, we can, again, coming out with reporting, once this goes live, you're going to be able to see everything that's happening. You'll be able to see every single company that we're targeting as part of your campaign. You'll be able to see performance by company. You'll say, okay, for this company, let's say for this building, Microsoft, we served 10,000 impressions. We saw 200 clicks. So you'll know. It's total transparency. Again, that's where you get the benefits of digital. So in digital, once you start running these campaigns, you'll be able to see everything in real time at a very granular level, so you'll know how well it's performing. And if you're tracking like lead, a lot of campaigns we do are lead gen, a lot of B2B, so they want people to fill out a form, so we can track that too. You can say, okay, here's how many impressions we delivered to this company, here's how many leads we saw from this company, how many clicks we saw from this company. It's all out there for you to see. There will be no, it's really not a black box, and sometimes digital can be thought of that way. I understand where you're coming from, but in this case, very detailed reporting. So you'll know exactly what's happening. Yeah.
It would seem to me, I could be wrong here, but a number of the Fortune 500 companies would have serious blockers on how people search the web, because these are business people you're targeting, but
Correct.
if you're 5 to 10 employees, maybe the owner-proprietor is kind of combining personal and business, but are you finding clients are really happy if they're trying to reach into the bigger?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Because again, without getting too far into the weeds on the approach that we take, so we can target these people at these business locations on any site on the entire internet. So whatever site they happen to go to. You know, you're right. There's going to be some restrictions. You know, but whatever, as long as they can surf on any site from the building, whatever
So
site.
they can surf on Thomas Register, for example.
Anywhere. Anywhere on the internet, right. So all we know is that this user is at this location, or if we did title targeting, we'll know this is an IT person at this building, and whatever site they go to across the entire internet, we will be we'll be able to serve ads to them across any site. So, yeah, I would say no, big companies are not an issue at all.
So I'm just curious, not so much about your company, but just in general. Are you saying that cookie data should be replaced with?
Well, not necessarily. No, that's a good. I would not say that completely. I said this is for right now. Still, 99% of digital campaigns are still relying on cookies to target. What I'm saying is this is a new trend that we are now starting to see, specifically for B2B.
And so if I'm an organization that uses cookies, is there value in replacing the cookie data, or do I still need that anyway, just because that's an identifier for what we're really talking about targeting?
Yeah, when it comes to these behavioral cookies, the ones I was describing before, the cookies that are, you know, that are used to track online behavior and make assumptions on people based on who they are. Yeah, that's still how most campaigns are being targeted. This is something that I think, at least in the B2B space, this is going to start to replace some of that. Because you'll go to that site that I showed you, the bluekai.com registry site. Go there yourself. You'll see that there's going to be a lot of wrong information on there. There really is. Yeah. But I'm not saying they're totally useless, but the data is not as accurate as you might think. We thought it was. I mean, for years, that was, like I said, no one ever questioned it. We just cookies collect data on people. We can figure out who they are, and we can target them.
Yeah,
But
so there's two parts to the question. The second half of it is, but it's an accurate representation of folks who might have shown interest in what you do. So it may not be demographically, psychographically correct, but at least the cookie is saying, I've been here.
well, that's a good point. Yeah, again, I didn't want to get too far into it. There's different kinds of cookies. So you're talking about like retargeting. So if somebody hits your website and you want to target them again later, yeah, I mean that's another type of a cookie. There's a lot of different types. I was referring to more of the behavioral cookies, those that are used to try to build profiles of people based on their online behavior. That's where there's a lot of inaccuracy. But there's retargeting for sure. I would definitely do that.
And then the second half is, how often would you recommend, assuming you're using this method of frankly any, how often would you recommend refreshing the actual list of people that, how often does this information change?
You're talking about a list that we get from a client, or it's,
The list, yes. I mean, how often would so I'm personally targeted incredibly inaccurate.
join the club. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
It's like an industry standard now to get mail to the wrong person and to get retargeted online for things that don't make any sense.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm assuming that that's just the fact that the same thing is used over and over and over again. So
Yeah, I mean, I think as the industry, at least on the B2B side, starts moving more into this kind of data, I think you're going to find that the number of untargeted ads will go down. I mean, we're seeing phenomenal results from our B2B clients that are doing this, that are, you know, so the amount of wasted impression, I would call a wasted impression an ad that served to the wrong person, is dramatically reduced when you use this data from D&B. So at least on the B2B side, you know, this is a way to solve that problem. B2C, Like if it's a consumer product, like I said, this really isn't being used on the B2C side because of privacy reasons. So that's still going to be cookie-based for the most part. And I don't really see that changing anytime soon just because of privacy. Again, we could do it. We thought of doing that actually for at one point, taking the same approach at the household level, but we chose not to do it because of privacy concerns. Yeah,
Question.
sure.
So one of the things that I struggle with is that I love your whole comment about aligning direct marketing with digital. I think that's really, it goes without saying.
Yeah.
But in our experience right now, I work for Allimed, it's a medical supply company.
Okay.
So we send out many catalogs a year, and I'm trying to align that with a direct mail campaign.
Okay.
Sorry, with an online.
Online campaign, yep.
And what's happening is that those emails are not being opened. People are not opening them. So the feeling is that, you know what, our online customers aren't interested, so we're not going to send those emails.
So is it, when you say you're doing an online campaign, is it an email campaign that you're doing?
An email that's in line with the direct.
An email, okay. So
We're driving the catalog and we're sending out an
email campaign, okay. So just to be clear, what we're talking about here is not email. These are display ads. Like these would be a banner ad or a video ad or an actual ad. It's not email. So when we did the same thing with that Rhode Island Novelty Company. So, in your case, what you could do is you take that catalog list, we could identify the companies in our database and then serve them display ads. It's not email. These would be, it could be a banner ad, it could be a video ad,
And we do
native.
those as well, but their results were really coming from the email.
Okay.
Where they weren't opening email, so the thought was, let's not send it. And I'm struggling with that a little bit, because I just feel like we should send it anyway. I
Okay.
feel like it's a
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, no, I understand.
It depends on the vehicle that the person is opening. To say that no one's opening it, be it a phone, an iPad,
Yeah.
a laptop, you just never know. Like when their right panel is displayed,
Yeah.
they are actually seeing it, but it's not counting as in the open.
Understood, yeah.
Right,
Well,
so I was curious what your thoughts were.
yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm not as familiar with the email side of it, so I don't want to comment on that. But what I can tell you is that this approach, when it comes to what we call display ads, which are banners or videos, because this information from D&B is so accurate and every impression is being delivered to the person you're trying to reach, it dramatically increases the chances that they're going to interact, either with the online campaign or the catalog, because they're getting both at the same time. And again, with the reporting, you'll be able to you can see in real time. These are the actual companies from your list that we're serving these ads to, and here's how many impressions we've served to that company, how many clicks we've seen, how many, if there's a lead form involved, how many conversions we've seen. You can see it all in real time. So there's none of this guesswork anymore. And it works. I mean, it's advertising, so it works most of the time. It's still advertising, so it depends on the offer and things like that. But if you think about the combination of this offline data and how accurate it is on the B2B side, so you can make sure that every ad is going to the right person, compared to the alternative, which is the cookie approach, where a lot of the ads are just being sprayed out there to a lot of untargeted people, it works. Yeah.
So you have a list, you may generate a list for one of your clients and create an online campaign.
Correct.
Do you serve that list back to the client to be used for an online?
No, so-
campaign, or is that something that your company makes?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So we could either, this happens one of two ways. One, we could either create the list. If you say, listen, like, I just want to target dentists. I don't have a list of them. I just know that's what I want to target. We can easily do that. We can go into our platform and say, okay, here are all the dentists in Waltham, for example. We know who they all are. We have their IP address. If we do that, no, we're not going to provide you back the list. We're just going to use that to target the digital campaign. So we can either create the list for you, or in a lot of cases, like I said, the client will actually have the list already. They'll say, here is my list that I want to mail the catalog to. Here it is. So then we will use this data from D&B to figure out who those companies are in our database and target them to their IP address with digital ads. In that case, it's your list, so you have that list. So we can either create the list or we can use a list you already have.
All right, so if you create the list, do you have a mechanism so they can serve an offline campaign along with it?
So if we create the list, if I understand your question, do we give the list back and say, here's,
Or can you give it to a mail house?
no. If we create the list, we're just going to use that to serve the ads. You'll be able to see you'll be able to see the companies that are on the list. You'll see that in reporting. Here are all, in that example I showed you before, here are all the dental offices.
So you use the tactics of an offline campaign like you did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But you won't support them.
Right, if we're going to create the list, like you don't have the list of dentists, you just want us to target them for you. We know who they are, we can target them, you'll see it in reporting, but no, we're not going to send a list back to you. We're not going to say, we're not in the list business. We're a digital company, yeah, so we can be able to target the digital ads to the right people and show you through reporting the performance of the campaign down to the company level.
But if they respond back to you,
Well,
they're your customer.
sure, of course, yeah, if they responded back, they fill out a form, sure.
The idea is you collect your own list once they respond.
Exactly, there you go, thank you. I should have just said that, yeah. Yes,
I'm serving myself.
I know.
I'm running this, so I'm just
Right.
looking to be able to-
If they respond and they fill out a form, of course, I mean, that becomes your data at that point, right? But the entire list that we're using, we're not going to send back.
It's the same thing when you purchase a list. Usually if you email blast the list out, you have to use a provider to email the list. And you don't get those names anyway until they respond. It's the same.
Yep, so that's it. So,
Great.
I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much.
You wanna go out and take a break as quickly as you can to come back in? I gotta set Alex up, so we're. I'm gonna plug you in, and you have to.